Chapter 181. Lin Fei's decision. In the Nine Profound sect, Lin Fei sat cross-legged in his cave dwelling, reporting to the Grand Elder. Suddenly, the sect master arrived. Now, even when the sect master came to Lin Fei's cave dwelling, he had to announce his arrival. After all, Lin Fei's status was now different from before. He was now regarded by all martial artists throughout the Great Chan and throughout the entire world as a godlike figure. He was also currently the stabilizing force of the Nine Profound sect. Lin Fei's prestige had long since surpassed the ordinary scope of a Grand Elder. In fact, if Lin Fei wished to take the position of sect master at this moment, it would be as easy as a common occurrence. "Sect master, come in." The voice of Lin Fei came from inside the cave dwelling. The sect master respectfully entered Lin Fei's dwelling. Upon seeing Lin Fei sitting cross-legged on the ground, the sect master respectfully greeted, "Greetings, Grand Elder." "Sect master, what brings you here?" Lin Fei opened his eyes. The sect master respectfully said, "Grand Elder, I have been closely monitoring the movements of He Mountain Dao and Guardian Primordial Mountain. After He Mountain Dao and Guardian Primordial Mountain learned that the Grand Elder has become a martial sage and slain Yuan Konza with a saber stroke. Both of these immortal sects immediately declared a lockdown, activating their mountain protection arrays. It seems that they have no intention of involving themselves with the world any longer." In reality, when He Mountain Dao and Guardian Primordial Mountain learned that Lin Fei had killed Yuan Konza, they initially refused to believe it. After carefully investigating the news and discovering that it was indeed true, they didn't hesitate any longer. They promptly secluded themselves from the world. Once they closed off their mountains, it meant that they would not venture down, and everything in the mortal world became irrelevant to them. The only exceptions might be the occasional recruitment of disciples, which might necessitate a descent from the mountain. But only a handful of people would venture down, and they wouldn't make a big fuss about it. They were truly afraid. Even though a Foundation establishment cultivator from Guardian Primordial Mountain was slain by Lin Fei, the Guardian Primordial Mountain did not dare to retaliate. Instead, they worried that Lin Fei might flatten the Guardian Primordial Mountain. Therefore, they promptly closed off their mountain and activated their grand array. These immortal sects, which have existed for over 1,000 years, had experience with such matters. Back when the founding emperor of Great Chan swept across the four corners of the world with his martial sage prowess, subduing the world. Knowing they couldn't compete, these immortal sects did exactly this. They closed off their mountains, secluded themselves from the world, and endured hardship. They continued to endure until the founding emperor of Great Chan disappeared. Only then did these immortal sects start stirring up trouble again. Fortunately, a Foundation establishment true person was born within the royal family. Although the Supreme Elder did not possess the might of the founding emperor of Great Chan, he was still a top Foundation establishment true person. He was able to keep other immortal sects from taking rash actions, leaving them with no choice but to seclude themselves. This lasted for over 400 years until the Royal Supreme Elder's lifespan ended and passed away in meditation. They began to stir up trouble again, attempting to take control of the world's power. Now, with Lin Fei's power growing, other immortal sects might not necessarily fear him. However, He Mountain Dao and Guardian Primordial Mountain, these two great immortal sects, currently had no Foundation establishment true person. How could they dare to involve themselves in worldly affairs? They had no choice but to seclude themselves by closing off their mountains. They would wait until their sect produce another Foundation establishment true person, or until Lin Fei dies. It's estimated that He Mountain Dao and Guardian Primordial Mountain would only dare to reopen their mountains then. This was the survival strategy of these immortal sects. If there were powerful enemies that cannot be defeated, could they not hide? He Mountain Dao and Guardian Primordial Mountain were both immortal sects with 1,000-year-old heritage. They possessed treasure that stabilizes their sects. Their mountain protection arrays were so powerful that even a martial sate with a manifested saber momentum cannot break through them. Otherwise, the founding emperor of Great Chan would have flattened those immortal sects long ago. How could there be room for the existence of those immortal sects? Now it was the same with Lin Fei. He didn't think that he was stronger than the founding emperor of Great Chan at the moment. After all, the founding emperor of Great Chan had managed to master momentum, and Lin Fei had yet to do so. If even the founding emperor of Great Chan couldn't break through the mountain protection arrays of those immortal sects, naturally, Lin Fei wouldn't be able to break through them either. He could only let those immortal sects close off their mountains. However, as long as he was present, He Mountain Dao and Guardian Primordial Mountain would have to obediently close off their mountains, not daring to take any rash actions. This was the deterrent power of Lin Fei, the martial saint. I understand. Is there anything else? Lin Fei looked at the sect master, who seemed to be hesitant, seemed there was more to be said. The sect master hesitated for a moment, but eventually took out a letter from his bosom. Grand Elder, the secret guards of the South King, on behalf of the South King's daughter, hope that the Grand Elder can make a trip to Chan City. This is a letter from Princess Ling Yara. Please have a look, Grand Elder. Lin Fei raised his head. He took the letter from the sect master's hand. Upon opening the letter, he saw the familiar handwriting. It was indeed from Lin Yara. The content of the letter was also very simple. First, it congratulated Lin Fei on achieving the status of martial sate, reaching the peak of martial arts, and shaking the world with his might. Second, it hoped that Lin Fei could make a trip to Chan City. After putting down the letter, Lin Fei did not speak, falling silent. The sect master finally couldn't help but say, Grand Elder, the situation in Great Chan is unstable now, and the Great Chan dynasty is in danger. Although our Nine Profound sect has a good relationship with the Great Chan royal family, we need to think carefully about such important matters. Chan City is now a whirlpool. Once you step into the whirlpool, it will be difficult to extricate yourself. Although you, Grand Elder, are now a martial sate, there are more than just He Mountain Dao and Guardian Primordial Mountain among the immortal sects in the world. Some foundation establishment true persons have been practicing for hundreds of years. Their depth is unfathomable, far beyond what Yuan Konza can compare to. I hope Grand Elder will think thrice. Lin Fei understood what the sect master was saying. He was hoping that Lin Fei would not go to Chan City to avoid stirring the troubled waters of the royal family. If anything happened to Lin Fei, Nine Profound sect would be in danger. The current Lin Fei wasn't just himself alone. It was the entire Nine Profound sect behind him. Lin Fei looked at the sect master and said indifferently, the reason why the world is so chaotic now, I believe, is clear. Behind it all are those immortal sects, coveting control of the world's power. If we truly go back to the time before Great Chan was established, when those immortal sects held power, do you think the Nine Profound sect could stay out of it? Even if I, a martial sate, am sitting here, can Nine Profound sect rest easy? The sect master didn't speak anymore. What was it like before the establishment of Great Chan? Some ancient texts briefly mention it. Back then, there were mortal nations. But they were divided into many nations, constantly warring with each other. And behind these nations all were those immortal sects. The immortal sects, high above, controlled everything. They didn't care about how many mortal people died or were injured. Holding power and controlling all kinds of spiritual resources in the world was all they cared for. Mortals were just people who served them generation after generation. If one generation died, another would grow. Moreover, ordinary people are without talent. In their eyes, they didn't even count as the same kind. This kind of high and mighty mentality was not the same as martial artists. After all, martial artists were also ordinary people in the eyes of chi cultivators. Anyone could become a martial artist. Even if a martial artist became a martial sate, he wouldn't have this kind of high and mighty mentality. martial artists and chi cultivators. To say they are born enemies was a bit of an exaggeration. But once the immortal sects control the world's power, martial arts would inevitably be suppressed. By then, let alone martial saints, even a martial arts master probably could only become a servant to be dispatched by the chi cultivators. Moreover, what the founding emperor of Great Chan was able to do, I can do too. A sharp light flashed in Lin Fei's eyes. The sect master shuddered in his heart. He already knew Lin Fei's determination. Tell the secret guards that I will certainly go to Chan City. Yes, Grand Elder. The sect master did not try to persuade him further. Instead, he respectfully withdrew. Chapter 182. Lin Yero's decision. Chan City, South King Mansion. Lin Yero was handling a large amount of business every day. Mostly military affairs and logistics. The army on the front lines was putting down rebellions, but it was not going smoothly. Therefore, various resources need to be continuously transported to the front lines. War, like a gold-consuming beast, all the resources are swallowed up. However, there was no sign of any improvement now. It was like a bottomless pit, making Lin Yero feel exhausted. However, at this time, Lin Yero showed a firm will. She couldn't fall. She now was not just one person anymore. Centered on her, behind her, there were already tens of thousands of people involved. She was a huge force. If she fell, there would be countless people falling with her. However, she was inherently weak. She also wished someone could help her. At this moment, in her mind, she couldn't help but imagine a figure. Will he come? Lin Yero hadn't received any news from the secret guards. After all, it took time for the secret guards to pass on messages. A breeze blew past. The candlelight in the room flickered slightly. Lin Yero suddenly looked up. She saw that in the room, she didn't know when an additional figure appeared. Lin Fei. Lin Yero widened her eyes. She even felt like she was hallucinating. However, this familiar figure was now quietly standing in front of her. Senior Sister Lin. Lin Fei spoke. The familiar voice let Lin Yero know this was not a hallucination. It was Lin Fei, he really came. For a moment, Lin Yero was overjoyed. Lin Fei was a martial sage famous all over the world. His status had already far surpassed her, a princess. Lin Yero looked complicated, with a slight smile on her face. I haven't congratulated you yet for finally achieving martial sage, standing at the pinnacle of martial arts and achieving your initial goal. When Lin Fei said he wanted to become a martial sage, Lin Yero just shook her head slightly. She didn't believe it at all. But now, Lin Fei was standing in front of her as a martial sage. She couldn't help but believe it. Yes, the goal I set casually at the beginning has been achieved. But this is far from being the pinnacle of martial arts. After a pause, Lin Fei looked directly at Lin Yero and said word by word, Senior Sister Lin, when I left Chan City, I gave you a choice and now you should have made a decision. Tell me, what is your decision? Lin Yero was taken aback. She of course knew what Lin Fei was talking about. Originally, before Lin Fei left, he gave her a choice. Martial arts or power. If she chose martial arts, Lin Fei would help her become an innate martial artist with all his might. But the road after that would have to be taken by Lin Yero herself. If she chose power, even if she wanted to become an empress, Lin Fei would help her. The words from the past were still vivid in her memory as if it was just yesterday. But now, Lin Fei had returned. She had to make a choice. Lin Yero sighed deeply and said quietly, with my talent, becoming innate is the limit. But an innate martial artist is just a fleeting 100 years. To become a martial sage, how easy could it be? Lin Fei closed his eyes. Lin Yero also remained silent. He knew that Lin Yero had made her choice. Lin Fei was not disappointed. On the contrary, he was very calm. It seemed that he had known Lin Yera's choice a long time ago. After all, not everyone is willing to risk everything to reach the peak of martial arts. In the mortal world, glory and wealth, power to dominate a lifetime, isn't it beautiful? If martial arts cannot become a martial state, it would be like the founder of the Nine Profound sect. Such a brilliant and peerless top powerhouse, in the end, could only sit withered on the peak of the founder. Alone, dying in loneliness and desolation. Lin Fei, there is a rebellion in the south now, and behind it are the Fairy Crane sect and Waterman sect. Before Lin Yera could finish her sentence, she was interrupted by Lin Fei. Senior Sister Ling, I understand what you mean. But feelings are feelings and trades are trades. The royal family has to offer something that satisfies me. Then I will make a move. This matter, you can't decide. I will personally meet the great Chan Emperor and the elders of the royal family. So, Lin Fei turned around. He had no intention of staying in South Qin Mansion. Since Lin Yera made her choice, Lin Fei knew that the last thread of affection between him and Lin Yera had come to an end. Lin Fei. Lin Yera called out. Whoosh! But Lin Fei's figure had already disappeared. However, although Lin Fei left, his voice still echoed in Lin Yera's ears. Sister Ling, since you have made your choice, let it be as you wish. Lin Yera suddenly widened her eyes. But outside the window, Lin Fei's figure was nowhere to be seen. Before long, Lin Fei arrived at the palace. He went straight to see the emperor. The great Chan Emperor was a middle-aged man. His eyes were dark and lifeless. His body didn't seem too good. This was the result of indulging in pleasure and emptying his body. Who? Seeing Lin Fei's figure, the emperor was startled. Lin Fei stood with his hands behind his back and said lightly, Nine Profound sect, Lin Fei. Emperor, call the elders of the royal family. There are some things that the emperor might not be able to decide. Lin Fei's words were a bit overbearing, even somewhat rebellious. But the emperor sobered up at this moment. Nine Profound sect, Lin Fei. Now this name was resounding throughout the world. Because Lin Fei was a martial sate. The emperor immediately called for the elders. The emperor seemed to be the supreme figure. But in fact, when it really came to the life and death of the royal family, he couldn't make the decision either. The elders of the royal family must step forward. Soon, the elders of the royal family came. Among them, there were some acquaintances of Lin Fei. At this moment, after these elders of the royal family saw Lin Fei, all of them were taken aback. They immediately stepped forward, bowed respectfully, and said, Greetings, martial sate. Now, Lin Fei was already a martial sate, equivalent to a foundation establishment true person. Even if they were of royal blood. They also had to pay their respects to Lin Fei. The current predicament of Great Chan, I have learned about. There is rebellion in the south and even support from the immortals behind it. I can take action, quell the rebellion, and even flatten the immortal sect behind the rebel army. But there are two conditions. The emperor and the elders were overjoyed. They were now in a mess because of the rebellion in the south. The death of the supreme elder caused the royal family to no longer have the power to suppress those immortal sects. If they did not suppress it in time, given time, the world would definitely be in turmoil. By then, the royal family would be helpless. But if this martial sate, Lin Fei, was willing to make a move, then it must be able to suppress the rebellion. After all, Lin Fei was the only martial sate who could slash the foundation establishment true person with a saber and the only martial sate in Great Chan. Martial sate, if you have any instructions, please feel free to tell. First, proclaim Princess Ling Yero as the royal princess and she will ascend to the throne in the future and become the empress of Great Chan. Second, the secret collection of royal martial arts needs to be open to me. The second condition, of course, was not a problem. As for the first condition, in fact, it was just that the emperor was not very willing. But the elders of the royal family didn't care who became the emperor. As long as it is the royal bloodline, there is no problem. Now, the world was in turmoil. The key was to preserve the royal family and protect Great Chan. Good, we agree to the conditions of the martial saint. Lin Fei was not surprised. With these two conditions, the royal family had no choice but to agree. Let's go, take me to the place of the royal martial arts secret collection now. Yes, martial saint. So, an elder led Lin Fei to the place of the royal martial arts secret collection. Lin Fei walked in alone. He needed a lot of saber techniques to evolve his saber momentum, especially the saber techniques at the innate level. Lin Fei came to a row of saber technique bookshelves. He closed his eyes. In his mind, he thought of Lin Yero. Today, he helped Lin Yero become the royal princess. This was equivalent to severing the emotional bond between him and Lin Yero. Shush! Lin Fei's emotions gradually calmed down. Now that the emotional bond is severed, it's time for me to evolve my saber momentum. Let's begin. Lin Fei's gaze became calm again. Chapter 183. Integrating Royal Saber Techniques, Saber Intent Transformation. Where Lin Fei's gaze fell were rows of bookshelves. Saber techniques, sword techniques, fist techniques, etc. Body refining level, acquired level, and innate level were all included. As for the quantity, it's at least 10 times more than the 9 profound sect. This is the foundation of the Great Chan royal family. After establishing the Great Chan dynasty, the founder of the Great Chan began to collect martial arts techniques from all over the world. Many martial arts were collected by the founder of the Great Chan. They were put into the secret collection of royal martial arts. Therefore, there were so many saber techniques here. Lin Fei didn't intend to examine the secret books one by one. He took a deep breath. Then, he released all his saber intent. Boon. Lin Fei's saber intent enveloped the entire secret martial arts collection. Now Lin Fei's saber intent was not just perfection anymore, but it had surpassed perfection. The cultivation progress had reached 55%. That is to say, Lin Fei's saber intent only needed to increase the cultivation progress by another 45%, then he could evolve the saber momentum. Like the innate level saber techniques such as the 3 abyssal sabers and 23 sabers, only 10 were needed. I wish to evolve the saber momentum. If you want to exist forever, then voluntarily integrate into my saber intent at the perfection level and help me evolve the saber momentum. By then, you will all become the cornerstone of my saber Dao. In the future, if my saber path transcends, you can also exist forever. Lin Fei said calmly. He was doing the same as he did in the 9 profound sect martial arts pavilion. Using the method of drawing a big pie, he bamboozled these saber techniques. Of course, it's not entirely a bamboozle. These saber techniques, once integrated into Lin Fei's saber intent, then evolved the saber momentum. These saber techniques could indeed exist forever. However, it was very difficult. Now, Lin Fei had only comprehended the saber intent. He hadn't even evolved the saber momentum yet. What if he got killed halfway through? Then the so-called saber Dao will naturally become empty talk. However, for these saber techniques, whether they were willing or not, it was all voluntary. Some saber techniques were willing to gather dust on the bookshelves, unknown for a lifetime. But some saber techniques were willing to make a big splash to stand out. Therefore, Lin Fei's words were voluntary on both sides, not forced. If there were those who were willing to integrate into his saber intent and become the cornerstone of his saber Dao, he would naturally be happy. Lin Fei showed a pure saber essence, emitting a terrifyingly sharp edge. If Lin Fei wanted these saber techniques to voluntarily integrate into his saber intent at the perfection state, he naturally needed to demonstrate some characteristics worth following for these saber techniques. For instance, his saber essence, which was like a real treasured saber, was invincible. Moreover, his saber intent integrated the saber intent of pulling the saber and the heavenly saber, which was very special. Martial artists choose martial arts. But why wouldn't martial arts have a choice to choose martial artists? Now, it's time for these saber techniques to choose Lin Fei. The ripple saber technique at the perfection stage is willing to integrate into your saber intent to increase the foundation of saber intent. The shadow saber technique at the perfection stage is willing to integrate into your saber intent to increase the foundation of saber intent. The swallow saber technique at the perfection stage is willing to integrate into your saber intent to increase the foundation of saber intent. In Lin Fei's mind, the system's voices sounded one after another. These were all saber techniques that voluntarily integrated into his saber intent. However, these saber techniques were all acquired level. So far, at least, none of the innate level saber techniques were willing to integrate into Lin Fei's saber intent. These acquired saber techniques might be numerous. However, without the integration of innate saber techniques, it was too difficult for Lin Fei to evolve the saber momentum. Even though the royal family had a deep foundation and many acquired saber techniques, most acquired saber techniques were similar to the 9 profound sects' acquired saber techniques. They couldn't increase the cultivation progress of saber intent by much. Lin Fei's saber intent cultivation progress was slowly improving. 56%, 57%, 58%, 59%, 60%. Indeed, it was very slow. Gradually, Lin Fei didn't even know how many acquired saber techniques he had integrated. Finally, the cultivation progress of his saber intent also stopped. It finally froze at the number 78%. Compared to the previous 55%, it had only increased by 23%. However, there was still a gap from 78% to 100%. Not a single innate saber technique is willing to integrate into my saber intent. Lin Fei frowned. Back at the 9 profound sect, even saber techniques like the 3 abyssal sabers, 23 sabers, and so on, all voluntarily integrated into his saber intent. But in the secret martial arts collection of the royal family, it seemed that these innate level saber techniques were all very aloof. They were unwilling to integrate into Lin Fei's saber intent. If I evolve the saber momentum, all innate level saber techniques will be independently presented in my saber momentum. You will no longer be ordinary. You will all become unique saber techniques. Lin Fei spoke again. The next moment, Lin Fei clearly felt it. It was as if a surge of extremely sharp breath suddenly awakened. The so-called saber momentum, in fact, was the martial artist who integrated all the saber techniques learned into a powerful suppressing force. In the saber momentum, there could be individual saber techniques present. Even some saber techniques carry unique saber intents, all could be presented in the saber momentum. That is to say, once covered by the saber momentum, the enemy might face attacks from countless kinds of saber techniques and saber intents. This was the terrifying aspect of saber momentum. Of course, many martial artists integrated saber intent and saber techniques completely. But Lin Fei made a promise he would retain these saber techniques in the saber momentum. He did not believe those innate level saber techniques would remain indifferent to his words. The next moment, in Lin Fei's mind, the system's voice indeed sounded. The perfection stage eternal night saber technique is willing to integrate into your saber intent, increasing the foundation of saber intent. Your saber intent cultivation progress increased by 5%. The perfection stage samsara saber technique is willing to integrate into your saber intent, increasing the foundation of saber intent. Your saber intent cultivation progress increased by 5%. The perfection stage God-slaying saber technique is willing to integrate into your saber intent, increasing the foundation of saber intent. Your saber intent cultivation progress increased by 5%. With the fall of Lin Fei's words, one after another saber techniques were willing to integrate into Lin Fei's saber intent actively. Moreover, they all could improve the cultivation progress of saber intent by 5% in one go. This indicated that these saber techniques were all innate level saber techniques. Moreover, they were almost comparable to the 3 abyssal sabers, 23 sabers among the innate level ones. They could be considered top-notch saber techniques. Lin Fei's saber intent was making rapid progress all the way. 83%, 88%, 93%, 98%. Boom. Lin Fei's mind was booming. Finally, when Lin Fei's saber intent cultivation progress reached 100%, his saber intent began its metamorphosis. Chapter 184. Evolving Saber Momentum. I am the Saber Saint. Saber intent, invisible and intangible. It's purely a force that cannot be seen or touched but could be sensed, closely relate to the spirit and will. But now, as Lin Fei's saber intent began to metamorphose, gradually, above Lin Fei's head, the entire royal martial arts secret treasury, a layer of translucent light appeared faintly, as if shrouded in midair. A terrifying pressure arrived instantly. If it was an acquired martial artist, or even a chi condensation cultivator, stepping into this translucent light, even moving was probably a luxury. Saber momentum. Lin Fei was overjoyed. He immediately understood his saber intent was finally starting to evolve into saber momentum. And this was just the beginning of the evolution. Saber momentum, not completely materialized, was between tangible and intangible. It was translucent. This also meant saber momentum could interfere with a little bit of reality. No longer was it an empty and void force but a visible and tangible peculiar power. At this moment, within Lin Fei's saber momentum, there seemed to be countless types of saber intents. There was sky saber intent, plucking saber intent, abyss saber intent, etc. And there were countless types of saber techniques. As long as Lin Fei is willing. Whoosh! The next moment, a strand of saber energy flew out and transformed into several large sabers. Suddenly, these large sabers automatically executed some profound innate level saber techniques. It's as if there were countless saber masters hiding in the saber momentum. Lin Fei was shocked. This is the terrifying aspect of saber momentum. Once a martial artist's saber intent evolved into saber momentum, the number no longer had any significance. Moreover, under the coverage of saber momentum, to those who were weaker than oneself, it's completely crushing. Even for those at the same level, for example, other martial saints or other foundation establishment true persons, Lin Fei's saber momentum would have a clear advantage. With the blessing of saber momentum, the power of any saber technique would be extremely terrifying. Therefore, once a martial saint understood saber momentum, there would be another 9. Saber Saint. Whoosh! Lin Fei pointed out. A strand of saber essence erupted instantly. This was a saber technique that Lin Fei had never used before. The 3 abyssal sabers. Whoosh! Another strand of saber essence flew out. This was also a saber technique that Lin Fei had never used before. The 23 sabers. There were also the Eternal Night Saber technique, the Samsara Saber technique, the God-slaying Saber technique, and so on. Strand after strand of saber energy flew out one after another. What they were executing were different saber techniques. As long as they were under the cover of saber momentum, these saber essences were as if they had come alive. With the support of saber momentum, saber essence could even fight on its own. Moreover, because Lin Fei's saber essence was closely related to saber momentum, when saber essence fought within the saber momentum, the scattered saber essence would also be recollected by saber momentum aside from the necessary loss, continuing to converge into other saber essences to fight. This greatly reduced the combat consumption of saber energy. No wonder only the martial saints who have realized saber momentum have the qualifications to be called saber saints. In the hands of saber saints, flying flowers and leaves are all profound saber techniques. Just a casual strand of saber essence is a mysterious saber technique. Lin Fei was also shocked. If it was said that becoming a martial saint would have various non-human means. And now, with the evolution of saber momentum, Lin Fei found saber saints' various means were even more beyond the understanding of ordinary people, even other martial artists, martial arts masters, and grandmasters. Lin Fei was afraid it was hard to understand. These were two completely different levels of power and means. After building the foundation, life is elevated and fundamentally different from ordinary life. Realizing saber momentum, saber technique can be said to be reborn. Even as long as I am willing, within the saber momentum, I can easily deduce many innate level saber techniques. I can even comprehend saber intent of them. Lin Fei closed his eyes. The whole body was shrouded in saber momentum. Countless saber technique inspirations erupted in his mind. Just, it was meaningless. Lin Fei had already evolved saber momentum. No matter how strong the innate level saber technique was, it was useless for Hen. Moreover, now, even if he integrated more innate level saber techniques, it would no longer improve any bit of Lin Fei's saber momentum cultivation progress. System. Lin Fei brought up the system panel to check his current martial arts situation. Host, Lin Fei. Martial arts realm, early stage martial saint. Saber momentum, beginner, progress 0%. Fist intent, mastery, progress 81%. Immeasurable fist, transcendence, progress 50%. Close yet distant, transcendence, progress 0%. Saber momentum, progress at 0. Innate saber techniques have no effect on saber momentum anymore. Lin Fei stood up. This time, he was very satisfied he successfully evolved saber momentum. The terror of the saber momentum exceeds many people's expectations. Especially, there was only a martial saint 300 years ago. 300 years ago, although the martial saint of the hidden sword sect was known as the sword saint, he didn't realize the sword momentum. Since the founding emperor of Great Chan, there had been some more martial saints born one after another. However, without exception, all of them did not realize momentum. Only the founding emperor of Great Chan realized the momentum, so he was invincible at his time. The improvement of Lin Fei's strength by this saber momentum was not 1 or 2 times but a tenfold increase. In terms of combat, the role was incalculable. However, Lin Fei still did not forget what is the root of martial saint. That was still the level of cultivation. Now, Lin Fei didn't have martial saint martial arts. Saber momentum couldn't be improved. It almost reached the limit of strength. Lin Fei looked at it in the martial arts secret stash. There were no martial saint martial arts. Presumably, the founding emperor of Great Chan became a martial saint at the beginning. But there were no martial saint martial arts. However, Lin Fei was not in a hurry about this. So, he stood up and left the martial arts secret stash. Martial saint, you are out. Outside were some people from the royal family who had been guarding the stash. Seeing Lin Fei come out, their faces showed respect. However, there was a hint of urgency in their eyes. What happened? Lin Fei asked. Martial saint, you've been in the stash for 3 days. 2 days ago, there was an urgent report. The situation in the south has worsened, and 2 rebel forces have captured several prefectures. The court's rebel suppression army was disastrously defeated and almost completely lost. Now, in Chan City, the people are in fear. The court urgently needs a big victory to stabilize the people's minds. Lin Fei looked at the other party. He should be from the royal family as well. Not some kind of eunuch. Otherwise, he wouldn't know so much about the situation. At this moment, there was a dense sound of footsteps outside. Several elderly members of the royal family came. Upon seeing Lin Fei, the elderly members of the royal family quickly approached. And they bowed deeply and said, Martial Saint Lin, the emperor has decreed and conferred Ling Yero as the imperial princess. Can the martial saint set off now? The situation is worsening if the rebellion is not quelled soon, I'm afraid. Lin Fei's eyes were deep. He said calmly, well, since you have all met my conditions, then I shall depart. By the way, the Fairy Crane sect and Watermoon Water sect are behind this rebellion, right? Yes, the Fairy Crane sect and Watermoon sect. Although they are not millennia-old immortal sects and have not produced foundation establishment true persons in the past, their strength should not be underestimated. Lin Fei remained non-committal. He took a step and his figure shot dozens of feet away, only leaving behind a sentence echoing in everyone's ears. Within 7 days, I will quell the Southern Rebellion. Stamp out the Fairy Crane sect and the Watermoon Water sect's mountain gate. Having said that, Lin Fei's figure disappeared from everyone's sight. For a moment, the royal family looked at each other. They were not surprised that Lin Fei could quell the Southern Rebellion. However, stamping out the Crane Gate and the Moon sect's mountain gate was another matter. After all, that's the lineage of the immortal sects. Ordinary foundation establishment true persons dare not claim they can stamp out these two great immortal sects even without the suppressing treasure of the sect. Is it really that easy to extinguish? Chapter 185. 900 years later, Saber momentum reappears. Yuan Province, outside Green Dragon Prefecture. A massive imperial army meant to quell the rebellion, but at this moment it had been utterly defeated. Bodies were strewn everywhere, piled up like mountains. The thick smell of blood was nauseating. The imperial army of 150,000 intended to suppress the rebellion, almost all were lost in this battle. The soldiers who escaped with the commander were even fewer than 10,000 left. The commander, South Mountain Marquis, wanted to commit suicide with his own sword. Fortunately, his personal soldiers desperately stopped him, but the South Mountain Marquis was already disheartened. The elite soldiers of the court were lost in this battle under his command. Even if he returned to the court, he would be thrown into the celestial prison. As for whether he would die or not, that would depend on his luck. Marquis, this battle was not our fault. Yes, Marquis. Those immortal sect demons used spells, causing our army's food and morale to be destroyed. They even used the technique of turning Banes into soldiers, causing our army to panic. Not to mention an army of 150,000. Even an army of 300,000 would have to be defeated. If the court does not send top immortals with the army, no matter how large the army is, it will be defeated. The subordinates of South Mountain Marquis were persuading him. They dared not let South Mountain Marquis commit suicide. Once South Mountain Marquis committed suicide, all of his subordinates, none of them could escape death. After all, the commander of the army committed suicide and they were still alive. How could that be possible? Therefore, they must desperately protect South Mountain Marquis. As long as South Mountain Marquis did not die, then they would still have hope. Immortals. Now where does the court have any top immortals to accompany the army? South Mountain Marquis sighed. When a country was about to perish, there must be demons. This demon, South Mountain Marquis understood now. Those were the hidden immortal sects. But these immortal sects, each of them had vast and boundless spiritual power. The court was helpless. What more could he, a South Mountain Marquis, do? Report. Commander, there is a martial artist blocking our retreat ahead. A scout reported. A martial artist blocking our retreat. South Mountain Marquis furrowed his brows. South Mountain Marquis, the army was defeated. You cannot escape the blind. Now there is only one way: defeat the rebels and suppress the rebellion. Only then can the merits offset the demerits. At this time, a figure appeared to take slow steps. But each step seemed to span dozens of meters. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived in front of South Mountain Marquis. South Mountain Marquis was not an ignorant man. He immediately knew that this person was a master. Please enlighten me, master. South Mountain Marquis bowed respectfully. I have promised the royal family to come and suppress the rebellion. You gather the defeated soldiers and wait quietly. Lin Fei said indifferently. Even if I gather the defeated soldiers, how can they fight against those rebels? Those rebels have tens of thousands of troops. Even if the master is strong. But how can one man's power resist a huge army? South Mountain Marquis looked at Lin Fei with suspicion. No worries, you all wait here and prepare to take over Green Dragon Prefecture. I will suffice alone. May I ask for your respected name? 9 Profound Sect, Lin Fei. After Lin Fei finished speaking, his entire person had already disappeared from everyone's sight. Upon hearing the name Lin Fei, South Mountain Marquis was shocked. A look of disbelief appeared on his face. He is the martial saint of the 9 Profound Sect. The only martial saint of Great Chan. South Mountain Marquis was thrilled. The martial saint of 9 Profound Sect. His saber cut down a foundation establishment cultivator of Guardian Primordial Mountain. This matter had already shocked the world. How could South Mountain Marquis not know? With the martial saint here, success is guaranteed. Even if there is only one martial saint, those rebels will definitely be defeated. Immediately gather the troops, follow behind the martial saint, and return to Green Dragon Prefecture. South Mountain Marquis swept away his previous desolation. He became vigorous and spirited again. At this moment, inside the Prefect's Yamen of Green Dragon Prefecture, the leader of the rebels respectfully stood in front of several Taoists dressed in Taoist robes. Don't look at him as the leader of the rebels, however, the real decision-makers were these Taoists. Or rather, the immortal sects behind these Taoists. Here, the Taoists were divided into 2 groups. One group was from Watermoon Sect. The other group was from Fairy Crane Sect. At this moment, Taoists from Watermoon Sect and Fairy Crane Sect were all beaming with joy. This time the Imperial Army was utterly defeated, with the entire 150,000 army wiped out in a single day. Presumably, it will be difficult for the court to gather a large army in a short period. We can take this opportunity to continue attacking cities and taking territory, at least first occupy Yuan Province. Now that the Royal Supreme Elder has passed away, the royal family is powerless to suppress the world. Not only Yuan Province, but also Xia Province must be occupied. We Fairy Crane Sect only want Yuan Province. You, Watermoon Sect, can occupy Xia Province. Our 2 sects, serving as each other's horns, will be enough to occupy the lands of the 2 provinces. As for other provinces, we can't reach out, there are other immortal sects. The Fairy Crane Sect and the Watermoon Sect both seem to be looking forward to occupying Yuan Province and Xia Province. By then, their sects would be high above. With the people of the 2 provinces providing for the sect, that would truly be a heavenly life. But we must be cautious. Great Chan has a history of 900 years after all. What if that old man really left something for the royal family? Or if Great Chan's founder left something behind, then we might be in trouble. The Fairy Crane Sect and the Watermoon Sect had not completely let down their guard. Therefore, even at the beginning of the rebellion, they were all tentatively testing the waters. It wasn't until the court had suffered defeat time and time again that they prepared to occupy the lands of the 2 provinces. Report. Leader and all immortal masters. There is a martial artist outside Green Dragon Prefecture who is walking towards here alone. A martial artist. Just one. The leader and all the immortal masters were somewhat surprised. Yes, just one person. The several immortal masters looked at each other. Their eyes were full of doubt. Let's go and see who this person really is. So, a group of people went to the city wall of Green Dragon Prefecture. They came to the city wall. Looking into the distance, there really was a martial artist. This martial artist was step by step walking towards Green Dragon Prefecture. However, it seemed like a step. But one step was dozens of meters. Moreover, as he got closer and closer to Green Dragon Prefecture, his body, astonishingly step by step, walked into the air. Crossing the air, walking in the void. Seeing this scene, the immortal masters on the city wall, one by one, their faces changed drastically. Martial Saint. He is the martial saint of the 9 profound sect, Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei. A person's name can cast a long shadow. Just hearing the name of Lin Fei, these high-level and top chi condensation cultivators trembled slightly. They even wished they could run away right now. It's not their fault for being scared. The notorious Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei was just too infamous. When Lin Fei first became a martial saint, he killed the Foundation establishment true person Yuan Konzi of the Guardian Primordial Mountain. This matter was even more earth-shattering. Everyone knew about it, it was well known. Since then, Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei had become a real and matchless fearsome figure in the eyes of all chi cultivators. Absolutely not to be provoked. Retreat. At this time, a top chi cultivator from the Fairy Crane sect gritted his teeth and said, "Retreat, abandon Green Dragon Prefecture. Martial Saint Lin Fei is coming, this person is not to be trifled with. We can only retreat. We'll leave first. Lin Fei is a martial artist and also from the secular world, he shouldn't massacre ordinary soldiers. As for you, run if you can, may fortune be with you." Without a word, the chi cultivators of the Watermoon sect and the Fairy Crane sect immediately urged their magical artifacts and fled frantically backward. Lin Fei didn't even arrive in person yet. He was merely recognized and scared off tens of thousands of troops. In the eyes of ordinary people, the immortal masters, who were high above and omnipotent, even just hearing Lin Fei's name, were scared and fled in panic. This scene stunned the troops of the court who were suppressing the rebellion outside Green Dragon Prefecture. They couldn't believe the scene before them. Lin Fei alone, without even saying a word, scared off tens of thousands of troops. Even when the founder of Great Chan was sweeping the world and was invincible, it wasn't this exaggerated. At this moment, even Lin Fei in the void was slightly stunned. They ran away. Lin Fei seemed a little surprised too. Those chi cultivators were so decisive. Seeing him, without a hint of hesitation, they even immediately abandoned tens of thousands of troops and turned around to run. If it was before, Lin Fei really had no solution. But now, Lin Fei was not the same Lin Fei as before. "Can you escape?" A sharp light flashed in Lin Fei's eyes. Boom. With Lin Fei as the center, a terrifying momentum burst forth. Saber momentum. 900 years later, Saber momentum reappeared. Chapter 186. The arrival of the martial saint, thousands of troops kneeled down. Lin Fei stood in the void. At this moment, his saber momentum exploded, like a large net, instantly covering the sky above Green Dragon Prefecture, suddenly enveloping the entire prefecture. Immediately, the entire Green Dragon Prefecture seemed to be enveloped by a faint white light. Moreover, everyone seemed to suddenly fall into a quagmire. It was difficult to move. It seemed there was heavy pressure on them as if they were carrying a mountain. What's going on? I can't seem to stand up. Such a heavy pressure, I can't even stand up. For a moment, many ordinary soldiers, their hearts were filled with fear. Under the suppression of the saber momentum, whether they had a saber or not, it didn't matter. They all were suppressed. Lin Fei took a step forward. Plop. Tens of thousands of rebel soldiers at this moment couldn't bear the heavy pressure. They actually all fell to their knees. Whether they were ordinary soldiers or body-refining martial artists, or even acquired martial artists at this moment, all fell to their knees as if greeting a deity. This scene was very shocking. And Lin Fei was step by step, slowly moving to the sky above Green Dragon Prefecture's city wall. He looked down and saw the densely packed rebels on the ground and some ordinary people. Now they were all kneeling on the ground. A single person suppressed tens of thousands of troops. This is a Saber Saint. Even a martial saint couldn't do this. Only the Saber Saint who had evolved Saber momentum could reach this level. By now, in the eyes of ordinary people, Lin Fei was actually no different from a deity. However, in Green Dragon Prefecture, there was still some people struggling. For example, those few Qi cultivators. When Lin Fei's Saber momentum descended, the Qi cultivators activated their magical artifacts and turned into a streak of light. When they tried to escape, they found their bodies shook. Then, they all fell to the ground as if carrying a mountain on their bodies, making them unable to move. Impossible, what on earth is going on? A martial saint couldn't possibly have this kind of power. Even if it's Saber intent, no matter how strong the Saber intent is, no matter how strong the martial Dao true intent is, it wouldn't make it impossible for us to even move an inch. Move. Lin Fei hasn't even made a move. What is this method? Some Qi cultivators hadn't fallen to their knees. They were only suppressed on the ground. Their spiritual power was surging and their magical artifacts were shaking. There was a faint struggle that was resisting Lin Fei's Saber momentum. Lin Fei came to the top of these Qi cultivators. His eyes coldly looked at them. When had Qi cultivators ever been so embarrassed? Kneel down. Lin Fei's voice was calm. Yet it was like thunder ringing in the ears of the Qi cultivators. Suddenly, the Saber momentum pressed down again. Plop. These few Qi cultivators finally knelt down as well. Like the other rebels, they all knelt on the ground. Their knees seemed to have grown roots, firmly stuck to the ground. These Qi cultivators felt as if they were going to suffocate. All of them looked at Lin Fei in the void with horrified expressions. Is this the martial saint of the 9 profound sect who cut down the foundation establishment stage with a saber? Their hearts were already filled with shock. In their sects, in fact, there were also records of some methods of the martial saints. However, although the martial saints were strong, they were not strong enough to this extent. They hadn't even made a move yet, they were immobilized by the mere pressure. Of course, they didn't know about the existence of Saber momentum. Only some ancient immortal sects could know about the existence of momentum. They just felt that Lin Fei's pressure was too terrifying. So much so that they couldn't even lift their heads. These Qi cultivators felt suffocated. They felt extremely suffocated in their hearts. As a respectable Qi cultivator, apart from the elders of their sect, when had they ever knelt to someone? Especially to kneel to a martial artist. Even if Lin Fei was a martial saint, so what? They were the lofty Qi cultivators. They were immortal masters. But now, all their pride had been shattered. They had knocked down right in front of Lin Fei. And no matter what they tried to do, it was wishful thinking even to stand up. Lin Fei just stood quietly in the void. At this moment, it was quiet in Green Dragon Prefecture. Tens of thousands of rebels had knelt down. Even the lofty immortal masters were kneeling on the ground. This scene was witnessed by the distant imperial armies assigned to suppress the rebellion. The imperial armies seemed unable to believe the scene before them. What was this? A miracle? Lin Fei was just one person, even if he was a martial saint. He had only ascended above Green Dragon Prefecture. There was no sign of him taking action. And yet, an army of 10,000 had knelt. Even those arrogant, lofty immortal masters too obediently knelt on the ground. Is this the power of a martial saint? This thought unconsciously flashed through many people's minds. The power of a martial saint was terrifying. When a martial saint arrived, 10,000 soldiers knelt. For a moment, the morale of the imperial army surged. With such an invincible martial saint, what couldn't they conquer? Lin Fei didn't care if the morale of the imperial forces surged. To him, whether the morale of the army was high or not, it didn't matter much. When his saber momentum was released, whether it was an army of 100,000 or several 100,000, it didn't matter. Even the slightest movement was wishful thinking. Sure enough, a martial state with or without saber momentum was a completely different concept. Lin Fei had been silent the whole time. The chi cultivators below couldn't bear it any longer. One of the top chi condensation cultivators gritted his teeth and said loudly, "Martial Sate, you are a lofty martial sate. We, the Fairy Crane sect and the Watermoon sect, admit that we have never troubled any member of the 9 Profound sect. We dare not provoke you, martial sate. Now, the entire world is suffering due to the incompetence of the royal family, causing the people to rise up and resist. We only hope to end the war as soon as possible and provide a stable environment for the people, because we cannot bear to see the people suffer from the saber and soldiers. Where is our wrongdoing?" Lin Fei looked coldly at this chi cultivator. Everyone knew the real reason these chi cultivators supported the rebels. It was for the benefit of their sects. Arguing was meaningless, so Lin Fei wouldn't argue. Whether there is a mistake or not, I'm too lazy to think about it. You rebelled and supported the rebels. I don't allow it. If I don't allow it, then it's a serious crime. And furthermore, the crime is unforgivable and must be punished." With those words, a strand of saber essence flew out from his body. Whoosh! The saber essence instantly transformed into a big saber, directly chopped down at the top chi condensation cultivator. Suddenly, this top chi condensation cultivator let out a scream. But he couldn't move at all. He could only watch as the saber essence cut into his own head. Thump! This top chi condensation cultivator was directly split into 2 halves by the saber essence. His body fell to the ground. The other chi condensation cultivators' faces turned pale, even their bodies were trembling. Not only are you guilty, but the Fairy Crane sect and the Watermoon sect are also guilty. I will personally pay a visit to the Watermoon sect and Fairy Crane sect and sever their lineage as a warning. Lin Fei's tone was calm. But the content made several chi cultivators' faces change instantly. In their hearts, they couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. Chapter 187. Great Charm has no immortals. No one can destroy our 2 great sects. Even a martial sate can't. Several chi cultivators were utterly terrified. Destroy the sect. Exterminate the lineage. These were things they would not even think about under normal circumstances. But now Lin Fei, this martial sate, said he wanted to destroy the sect. The words of a martial sate, especially one who could slash a foundation establishment true person with his saber, were indeed quite intimidating. For a moment, all these chi cultivators became terrified. Lin Fei was indifferent. Regardless of whether he could destroy the 2 sects or not, he would not let these people go. Thus, Lin Fei extended his hand. Then, he flicked his finger. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Next, strands of saber essence flew out. In an instant, they struck these chi cultivators. Splash! For a moment, the ground was covered in blood. Several chi cultivators from the Watermoon sect and Fairy Crane sect were all killed by Lin Fei. Next up, Fairy Crane sect. Lin Fei's gaze looked at the distant void. Fairy Crane sect and Watermoon sect. The royal family naturally had the locations of the 2 sects. The locations of all the sects in the world were all under the control of the royal family. When leaving Chan City, Lin Fei had already received the map. He knew the specific locations of the 2 sects. Soon, the South Mountain Marquis's army entered Qinglong Prefecture. They completely controlled Qinglong Prefecture. Some of the high-ranking members and leaders of the rebels were all controlled by the suppressive forces. The remaining regions didn't even need to bother, because there weren't many rebels in those places. They were all a group of disorganized mobs. Without the chi cultivators, even if only 10,000 men remained in the suppressive forces, they could easily crush them. Marquis of South Mountain, I'll leave this place to you. I still have to go and destroy the sects of the Water Moon sect and Fairy Crane sect." After finishing his words, Lin Fei took a step out. In a few leaps and bounds, he disappeared from sight. However, when the Marquis of South Mountain heard Lin Fei's voice, he seemed not to have come back to his senses. What had he just heard? Lin Fei was going to destroy the sects of the Water Moon sect and Fairy Crane sect. How could that be possible? Those were immortal sects. Lofty immortal sects. In the realm of Great Chan, there existed numerous secluded immortal sects. They had persisted for over a millennium, some even for several millennia, witnesses to the cyclic rise and fall of dynasties. Even the Great Chan founding emperor was powerless against them. Perhaps only those who could decimate foundation establishment true persons could do that. In fact, such feats had occurred. Once, the Great Chan founding emperor had slain many a foundation establishment true person. The original royal supreme elder, when suppressing the world, had likewise slain many foundation establishment true persons. Yet, to slay a foundation establishment true person was an entirely different concept from eradicating the immortal sect's lineage. Great Chan is on the brink of significant upheaval. The Marquis murmured in a low voice. Seeking Immortal Town. Initially, this place harbored no settlement. However, centuries prior, rumors spread of an immortal residing here. Thus, gradually, many were drawn here in an attempt to find the immortal or to try their luck, hoping to gain an immortal's favor. So, this place gradually buzzed with a lot more activity. Eventually, a town formed and named Seeking Immortal Town. At this moment, 2 young men arrived in Seeking Immortal Town. Here we are, Seeking Immortal Town. But all our inquiries have only yielded that to find an immortal, we must venture into the mountains beyond the town. Those immortals sometimes appear in the mountains. If we are lucky, they might accept us as disciples. What are we waiting for? Let's go. No matter what, we must find an immortal and become immortal disciples. These 2 young men traversed 1,000 miles to reach Seeking Immortal Town in pursuit of an immortal. Or rather, hoping for an immortal's favor. They had once seen an immortal in their hometown. A figure of elegance and charm, idly wandering among the mortals. A sight that kindled their envy. Of course, what was most critical was that their closest relatives were of great age. They hoped to find some immortal elixir for their loved ones. Perhaps it might extend their years. The 2 young men, resolved and undeterred, immediately left Seeking Immortal Town for the mountains. The mountains were fraught with wolves and leopards, a realm of great peril most would dare not venture within. But for the young men seeking the immortal, they paid no heed to the danger. They wandered in the mountains for several hours and even encountered danger en route. If they had not been armed with beast-repelling powder, they would have likely perished within this woodland. Let alone the immortal, they didn't even glimpse a shadow of one. Alas, it seems we are not destined for the immortal's favor. Immortals place great importance on this destiny. Without this destiny, even if an immortal were before us, we would not say. Perhaps this mountain is indeed haunted by immortals. But the immortals refuse to see us. Even if we waited 10 days, a month, or even a year, we would likely never find an immortal. The 2 young men felt a bitter disappointment. They had been seeking immortals for such a long time and naturally knew that immortals valued destiny. With destiny, they could encounter immortals wherever they went. Without destiny, even if an immortal were before them, they would not recognize it. Just as their spirits were dampened and they were preparing to leave, suddenly, one of the young men widened his eyes abruptly, looking into the far-off void. Ah! An immortal. It's really immortal. Have we finally encountered an immortal? The 2 young men watched a silhouette materialize in the void. One step at a time, it descended from the void, landing at the foot of the nearby mountain. For a moment, the 2 young men were overcome with excitement. Hurry, let's go ask the immortal to take us as disciples. The two young men decisively, immediately sprinted towards the immortal's silhouette in the distance. Soon, they saw the immortal standing at the foot of the mountain, seemingly inspecting the grand mountain. The two young men gathered their courage and immediately approached. With a thud, the two young men fell to their knees and reverently they said, "Oh, esteemed immortal, please accept our obeisance. We were able to see you, which surely signifies our destined bond. We hope for your mercy to accept us as disciples." Without further ado, the two young men prostrated themselves. However, just as they were about to bow, they felt a sudden tightening around them and found they could not move at all, let alone bow their heads. No need for prostration. Moreover, I am not immortal. Lin Fei spoke indifferently. The two young men were just ordinary people. He had noticed them long ago. He just didn't expect that these two young men would mistake him for an immortal. Not an immortal. The two young men had seen Lin Fei descend from the sky. Such a divine technique, even if he was not immortal, he must not be far from it. Thinking this, the two young men immediately said, "Even if you are not immortal, you must be nearly one. We wish to become your disciples." Lin Fei turned to look at the two young men. "I am a martial artist, not an immortal. Furthermore, there are no immortals here," Lin Fei spoke indifferently. "A martial artist?" The two young men were taken aback. They naturally knew of martial artists, those strong and formidable wanderers. But the gap with the immortal before them was too vast. How could he be a martial artist? "We came from the Seeking Immortal town. The people there all said that this place is frequently visited by immortals. Indeed, for hundreds of years it's been said that immortals haunt this place. How can there be no immortals?" The two young men were somewhat disbelieving of Lin Fei's words. "This is the mountain of the Fairy Crane sect. It's merely the ordinary disciples of the Fairy Crane sect that appear here. Their occasional appearances have led many people to mistakenly believe that there are immortals here. Those disciples of the Fairy Crane sect are just chi condensation cultivators. They are like you, only with a lifespan of 100 or so years. How dare these mere chi condensation cultivators dare to call themselves immortals? Chi condensation cultivators." The two young men were having their eyes open today. They hadn't expected that this martial artist would say that there were no immortals here at all. Only chi condensation cultivators. "All right, you should leave. There will be a great battle today. I intend to destroy the mountain gate of the Fairy Crane sect to avoid involving you." With a wave of Lin Fei's hand, a strand of his saber essence directly took the two young men several hundred meters away. The two young men were astounded. Such a technique was no different from that of an immortal. As to whether he was immortal or not, what difference would it make? Such an exciting battle. Although they were nearly several hundred meters away from Lin Fei, they were quite clever and felt that it was still unsafe. So they retreated further and further until they were a considerable distance away. Only then did they hide behind a big tree to watch. Is there really a Fairy Crane sect? The two young men were somewhat puzzled. They looked at the desolate peak in the distance. Where is the Fairy Crane sect? Lin Fei stood in the void. He stood with his hands behind his back, gazing at the void in front of him. Without any response. His words fell, and there was no response from the Fairy Crane sect. The Fairy Crane sect, after all, was a sect of immortal Tao. There must be a mountain-protecting formation that ordinary people simply could not find it. Even innate martial artists, martial arts grandmasters, if the Fairy Crane sect didn't open the mountain gate, martial arts grandmasters would be just as unable to find it. However, martial saints are different. In Lin Fei's eyes, everything about the Fairy Crane sect was clear at a glance. Since the Fairy Crane sect did not come out, then Lin Fei didn't bother waiting. Buzz. The next moment, Lin Fei exerted his saber momentum. Suddenly, a layer of semi-transparent light enveloped the void in front of him. The originally empty void, under the cover of the semi-transparent light, actually sent out ripples, just like the ripples of water. Then, the semi-transparent light rapidly extended. Layer upon layer of ripples, constantly stirring. Then, buildings appeared in the void. Even the towering mountain peak disappeared. Instead, countless mountain peaks appeared. Various pavilions and towers, even the sound of cranes could be heard. And in the void, there were also countless Taoists standing in the air. Immortals. The eyes of the two young boys nearly bulged out. Such a heavenly landscape, if not immortals, then what else could it be? However, the immortals that the two young men saw at this moment had faces full of terror. They looked at Lin Fei from a distance and spoke loudly. "We were unaware of the arrival of the martial saint, and the fairy crane sect has failed to greet you properly." But isn't the martial saint a bit too aggressive? If the martial saint is dissatisfied with our fairy crane sect supporting the rebels, we can just withdraw. Moreover, we can promise not to support the rebels in the future, okay? Even, the fairy crane sect can follow the example of He Mountain Dao, close the mountain for 100 years and ignore worldly affairs. Would the martial saint be satisfied? The sect master of the fairy crane sect, a top-tier chi condensation cultivator at the 11th level, stated the decision of the fairy crane sect. In fact, this was also a condition. Even in the old times when the Royal Supreme Elder was in power, they said the same to him. And of course, they acted accordingly. Being able to proactively concede to Lin Fei, even actively closing the mountain gate, was already the greatest concession that the fairy crane sect could make. Lin Fei's gaze was calm. He looked down from a high position, looking down at the group of chi cultivators from the fairy crane sect below. Even if they conceded, in their eyes, there seemed to be no trace of fear. Perhaps they were still thinking after several hundred years, the closure of the mountain would end. Or, the fairy crane sect would give birth to a foundation establishment true person and they could re-enter the world again. Those 1,000-year-old immortal sects are like this. Even with a heritage of several thousands of years, when a powerful enemy appears, they would close the mountain gate and could even close it for several hundred years. Avoiding and not coming out. Wait until the end of the powerful enemy's life, or after they disappear, then those immortal sects would come out one after another, re-enter the world and compete for worldly power. Immortal sects. Lin Fei's eyes were cold, and he asked indifferently, "He Mountain Dao, Guardian Primordial Mountain, both have powerful magic treasures of the sect and mountain protection formations. They can protect the sect and are not subject to the attacks of martial saints and foundation establishment true persons. What does your fairy crane sect have? It seems that you still don't understand your own situation. Now, let me help you understand better. Even if it's an immortal sect, there are differences. In front of me, you don't have the qualifications to negotiate terms." Boom. In the next moment, Lin Fei's saber momentum burst out in full force. Almost instantly, the entire gate of the fairy crane sect was enveloped within it. Many chi cultivators from the fairy crane sect felt as if they were carrying a mountain on their backs and their bodies unable to move. Activate the mountain protection formation. The fairy crane sect did not dare to delay. The mountain protection formation was activated instantly. With the opening of the formation, it isolated Lin Fei's saber momentum. However, Lin Fei just stretched out his hand. The next moment, infinite saber essence exploded from within his body. Gradually in the void, it condensed into a saber. A saber that was solid as reality and was several hundreds of meters high. It was this saber that spanned across the void. Even through the mountain protection formation, it caused numerous chi cultivators to feel indescribably terrified. Slash! Lin Fei's hand waved lightly. Immediately, the several hundred-meter-tall saber fell from the void, bringing the might to overturn heaven and earth. It fiercely slashed on the mountain protection formation. Crackle! The earth-shattering collision that was expected did not happen at all. All the people of the Fairy Crane sect seemed to have frozen in place all of a sudden. The mountain protection formation that they had high hopes for actually couldn't withstand even for an instant. Crack, crack. Boom, boom, boom. This mountain protection formation was composed of 6 magic treasures. It could be called the strongest measure of the Fairy Crane sect. Even a general foundation establishment true person definitely wouldn't be able to break it. But now, these 6 magic treasures were all instantly shattered. The mountain protection formation was instantly cut open by Lin Fei's 100-meter heavenly saber. Rumble. The several hundred meters heavenly saber fiercely descended, directly cleaving a mountain peak of the Fairy Crane sect. Suddenly, the sky collapsed and the earth sank. Countless chi cultivators from the Fairy Crane sect tried to escape, but they couldn't. Without the mountain protection formation, Lin Fei's saber momentum instantly suppressed the entire Fairy Crane sect. Kill. Lin Fei shouted in a low voice. The heavenly saber that had originally condensed, its saber energy had already dissipated. However, under the saber momentum, these saber energies actually recondensed again. The heavenly saber was instantly divided into thousands of strands of saber energy. These strands of saber energy were as if they had grown eyes, flying towards the disciples of the Fairy Crane sect who were suppressed by the saber momentum. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Each strand of saber energy instantly pierced through the heads of a disciple from the Fairy Crane sect. The Fairy Crane sect had hundreds of disciples, but in less than a quarter of an hour, the entire Fairy Crane sect had become dead silent. A thick smell of blood permeated the entire sect. Lin Fei took one last look at the Fairy Crane sect. In the void, countless saber energies converged once more. Heavenly saber art, slash. The next moment, the several hundred-meter tall heavenly saber in the void instantly fell. Rumble. Countless mountain peaks of the Fairy Crane sect were cut off by the heavenly saber. Rocks and mountains collapsed just like an earthquake. In the blink of an eye, the huge Fairy Crane sect was completely buried in a pile of rubble. The Fairy Crane sect was extinguished. Not a single disciple managed to escape. Even the lineage was completely cut off. Next, the Watermoon sect. Lin Fei did not even look at the Fairy Crane sect. His figure disappeared in an instant, leaving behind 2 young men with stunned expressions and shocked faces. They had witnessed with their own eyes the destruction of the Fairy Crane sect. That was the immortal sect in their hearts. However, such a prestigious immortal sect had ended up like this. I think we should go to the 9 profound sect to practice martial arts. These immortals are so weak, it's better not to seek the Tao of immortality. Good, let's go to the 9 profound sect. The 2 young men also had the idea of practicing martial arts in their hearts. So, they quickly left the Fairy Crane sect and rushed towards the 9 profound sect. Lin Fei didn't care about the thoughts of the 2 young men. He made another trick to the Watermoon sect. As before, the Watermoon sect was even worse than the Fairy Crane sect. Similarly, Lin Fei broke the mountain protection formation with one saber. He slaughtered everyone in the Watermoon sect. And this time, many people outside the Watermoon sect witnessed this scene. The Watermoon sect was eradicated. News spread like wildfire. In the 13th year of Yongqing of Great Chan, on the 18th day of the 4th month, Martial Sage Lin Fei, with supreme power, in one day, successively eradicated the Fairy Crane sect and the Watermoon sect, 2 major immortal sects. The 2 major immortal sects, their lineage was severed, and everyone in the immortal sect was slaughtered to extinction. When the news came out, the immortal sects were greatly shocked. The martial arts world was greatly shocked. The world was greatly shocked.